So you pulled your hamstring and now it's all stiff and tight and you can't work out like the way you want to. You're in the right place. In this video, I'm gonna show you exactly what you could do to fix this problem. What's going on, guys? Dr. Nick Bonforte. In this video, we're gonna go all over how to fix your hamstring strain or a pulled muscle. Be sure to look down below timestamps if you want to just skip right to the exercises and avoid me just talking about my rationalization and whatnot. So if you want to skip to all that, go ahead, check out the exercises. But if you want to stick around for the rationalization, then do that. And I think it would be a better idea to do that so that you get a better understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. Now, before we jump into the exercises, let's just recap where the hamstrings are and what they do so we have a better understanding of this. So the hamstrings are located on the back of the leg. They go from your pelvis all the way down to your knee. And they're responsible for bringing the hip backwards into hip extension and flexing your knee. So when we're putting this muscle on stretch, we have to go into hip flexion and knee extension. That will come into play when we understand more of the exercises from this standpoint. But it's a good idea to understand where they live and the action of them and what puts them on stretch. Also, more commonly than not, we tend to get strains in the middle of the muscle belly or mid-muscle belly versus proximal hamstring strains or distal hamstring strains. Typically, it's more associated with a mid-muscle belly strain. So let's target it from there. So with this exercise, we're working on hamstring isometrics. In this video, I'm gonna demonstrate 3 different positions. So I'm presetting my hip in hip flexion when I'm on my table, and I'll be in position 1 where my knee is bent more, position 2 where it's only slightly bent, and then position 3 where it's barely bent. The idea with this is we're putting the hamstring on more length as we straighten the leg, but we want to figure out your starting point. So in each case though, you're going to be holding an isometric to the hamstrings. The idea is you want to think about pushing your heel down through the ground and then think about scraping the floor towards you, or think about scraping your heel closer to your butt, but you're not moving the ankle or the heel or the foot. You're just thinking of pushing down and scraping. What that will do is activate the hamstring so that you isometrically load it in that position. So the concept in position 1, you would apply that concept as you hold it isometric. And when you feel your hamstrings on and working from an isometric standpoint, you want to hold that isometric and build up to about 30 seconds. Once 30 seconds is done, you can do 4 rounds. You get about 2 minutes of duration through this. Now with isometrics, especially in the beginning stages, you want to up the frequency to that, maybe 2 times a day or 3 times a day. But the idea and the concept is to understand how you're not moving your leg, you're just isometrically working it. Then you take that concept, and once you feel good in position 1, you would then progress your leg to a straighter position or on more length of tissue. So you don't want to just progress from phase 1 to position 2 to position 3. If you can't go to position 2 because it's too painful, you stay within position 1 until you're ready for the next thing. But you want to go through lengthening ways so that we isometrically load the hamstrings. Now, the concept, like I said, is the most important. Pushing down and scraping the floor so you actually feel your hamstrings working and you hold that feeling for the isometric hold. In this case, I like 30 seconds and you do 4 rounds. So with hamstring strains, I love starting with isometrics. Isometrics builds tension into the muscle area and it also lowers pain. Now the concept with this is understanding where the tissue severity is and when to put it on stretch and when not to put it on stretch. If you have a very acute hamstring strain, you're not going to be able to put it on massive stretch. So you have to regress it a little bit. And in this case, position 1 might be the better idea. Versus if it's more of a longer lasting thing, you can progress to different lengthening positions quicker. But the idea is to understand the principles with that, and you apply the isometrics to a lengthened position that you can tolerate. And then you go further and further and further so that we can get the tissue on length. If you remember in the beginning of the video, the tissue on length of the hamstrings is when it's in hip flexion and knee extension. So with me setting up on the table, I'm already presetting myself in hip flexion. Then with the knee, we're going straighter and straighter to put it more on length at the knee's end. So the idea is to understand that principle. Now you'll notice on position 3, my leg is completely straight and I actually lean my chest forward a little bit. With me leaning my chest forward, that puts my hip more in hip flexion. That puts the hamstrings on more length, and you apply the concepts of the isometric in that position. But if we zoom out and really just understand the concepts, is you're applying isometrics to different levels of a lengthened tissue for the hamstrings. Now with this stretch, we're doing an active knee extension. So you'll notice I have my hands behind my knees, my ankles relaxed, and I'm just kicking my legs straight up until I feel a nice tugging sensation to the hamstring. We could build different variables to this. You could hold that end position for a duration of time, 5 seconds as an example, or 10 seconds, and then you come back down and then you repeat it. What this does is when you kick your legs straight, you're activating your quads, which then reciprocally inhibits the hamstring muscles or relaxes the hamstring muscles. So we're getting a dynamic stretch here without putting too much emphasis on specificity and stretching the hamstrings. We're stretching it indirectly by activating the quads. Now to further this, I could also put the hamstrings on more stretch by bringing my knee closer to my chest and then performing the same thing, where my knee is now closer to my chest, which is in more hip flexion, and that's on more stretch, and then I go to straighten my knee, stretching it at the knee. So now I'm stretching it on both ends more, and I apply the same concepts. I kick it to the point where I feel a nice stretch, hold it for a duration of time, come back down, and I could repeat multiple cycles. With this, I generally like hold the stretch for a little bit of time, 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and I like volume with this, 3 or 4 sets of 10 to 15. Then you can further progress it by automatically keeping the leg completely straight, and then you raise it up to the point where you feel like a tugging sensation to the hamstrings. You could hold the end position and then come back down. The classic active straight leg raise. But sometimes when the hamstrings are stiff and tight and strained, they don't want to be stretched immediately, but you could progress through these different ones to then ultimately get up to this stage. So this one, you keep the knee locked out, you use your quads to raise your leg up to the point where you feel like you can't go further, hold it for a little bit, come back down. The same concept here applies. I like reps and volume, 3 to 4 sets, 10 to 15 to really get the hamstring dynamically moving. Now with the dynamic stretches, depending on severity and whatnot, you want to monitor how much stretch you're putting the hamstrings on. So with the first one that I demoed, the knee is further away from my chest. Why is this important? If it's too much of a strain, the muscles don't want to be stretched that much, but we still want to put some directionality and load to it just in a lower level environment. So with it being on less stretch, you could apply the concepts to ultimately get the hamstring adapting more. With the knee closer to my chest, I'm putting it on stretch on both ends, and you can build up more of an emphasis of putting lengthened motion and lengthened specificity to that hamstring region while applying the same concepts of reciprocal inhibition. When the knee is closest to my chest, I'm on more hip flexion, and then I also want to activate my quads. When I activate my quads, I'm loosening up or I'm reducing the amount of effort to my hamstrings. So that's the idea, to dynamically stretch it versus putting active load through it. Then the last progression to the stretch is the active straight leg raise, where we're already immediately starting on a full stretch position at the knee, and we go up and we're moving into our lengthened position. Now this will be a lot harder to start with if you're dealing with an acute strain or in different stages, but the idea is you want to progress up to this so that the hamstrings can be dynamically stretched further and further as you get ahead of this stuff. So with this exercise, we're working on hamstring eccentrics, where we're putting directionality and directional load through the hamstring region. So with this, I'm using my band, have it attached to my ankle, and from here, my knee stays in a bent position, so I'm slacking the hamstring tissues. Now, given my chest angle, I'm in hip flexion. So the idea now is to straighten the leg and put it more under load. So you want to control the knee being straight so you eccentrically load that tissue. Now from here, reps is important. So I like 3 sets to 4 sets of 12 to 15 reps so that you get enough volume into this. Now, concepts here are also important to understand. You don't want to just fling your leg out and not control it. You like to start with slow eccentrics so that you could build adaptation and get more of a muscular building response because you're putting more load through the area. More load through the area stimulates more micro tears, stimulates more muscle building. So the idea is to get slow directionality to the hamstrings with this type of exercise. Now with eccentrics, if you're not hitting that in part of the process, you're missing a huge piece to the puzzle. We have to be putting the hamstrings under lengthening load. A lot of times we get these strains in our hamstrings with eccentric load because the tissue is not prepared for it. So we have to adapt the body to what we're gonna be exposing it to. So typically we get hamstring sprains or strains when we're sprinting and our leg is out in front of us straight. That's more on length and it's putting eccentric load through it. Or if you go to kick a soccer ball as an example, you're going into hip flexion and knee extension. You're stretching it on length quickly. So you need to put eccentric load through it so that you can build up that strength. Now, this concept here is lengthening the tissue at the knee. Now you could do the same type of concept if you put your leg up on something and you lean your chest forward. You're just be lengthening the tissue at your hip. But we're going, in this case, just focusing at the knee, but understanding the concepts of applying eccentric is the most important part of this, because there's millions of exercises you could do. Understanding the principles of why you want to do it is the key here. So with eccentrics, foundational into it, and you want to build progressive overload to it. So if the bands are too light, go harder. Make it challenging for you to get some load to that area so that you could beef up the tissue to take a bigger punch. So I hope this video gave you some insight on understanding how to go through the process of dealing with a hamstring strain to this region. Now the idea here is we focused on isometrics, then we focused on lengthening the tissue with a dynamic stretch, and then we focused on lengthening the tissue with load, eccentrics. Now, are these the end all be all? Of course not. There's many other things to do, but these are very good ones to initially get you started, to lower the pain, decrease the severity of it, and then build off of it. Now, I really do hope you gained some insight and value to this. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate it if you subscribe down below to the channel, like this video, leave any comments down below. This is Dr. Nick. I will see you on the next one.